my days, I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have made me through the fire in the darkest night. You are close like no other. I love you as a father. I love you as a friend. And I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And I will sing of the goodness of God. Okay, so I'm from Jamaica, and I attend the Old Harbor Bay Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm the Adventist youth leader and music leader as well. I've been here since May, and I've been doing online worship. And there's something that I just wanted to be in the sanctuary this morning.
Amen.
And so I journeyed here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Glad you found us. I knew when I heard that voice that you'd be up to the challenge. Thank you very much. Just 1 second. Are we live? Okay, this is round 2. Talking about a very important to me, and probably should be a very important topic for all of us. Anyway, glad we're gathered here. We're going to ask some questions first, kind of rhetorical because we're not going to answer them right away, but then we're going to get into some pretty good answers to these questions about creation versus evolution. And some of us out there, like myself, are hard of hearing. So if I'm not projecting, let me know. Tell me I'm not getting it out. Interesting. So right off the bat, it's not responding. There it is. So are evolution and creation compatible? Well, not in the least. And that's what we want to understand for sure. Now, last time I did a sermon, we were covering the same topic, but kind of off the surface. And now I want to dig in just a little bit more. So stand by as we ask these questions. Billions of years versus thousands of years if we were creationists. evolution tells us that we're getting better all the time. And we're going to look into that more, and we're going to see. We started out single-celled from the pond to Darwin to our best scientists. So anyway, we're going evolution, we're going in a better direction all the time. Creation says we were started out perfect and kind of running downhill. We're going to see that more as we go. In evolution, they say, and they're cornered themselves, they did corner themselves, they say that natural processes only, no supernatural. Because God's got to be out of the picture, and they cannot observe them, test them, and they won't consider them. And even as the evidence gathers, guess what? As the evidence gathers, it's pointing more and more towards creation, and they're getting pigeonholed more and more. So this could actually be fun. But it helps to look into it, to have a little bit of information, and today I'm pointing you in that direction. Can you teach science without evolution? The flat answer to that is in most cases, yes. If you want to be a doctor, you don't need evolution. You want to learn about the body and how to heal it and all the chemistry and the science that goes with it. If you want to be a physicist, you don't have to be an evolutionist to work with the numbers and look at what exists in the cosmos or on the earth. The place where you really need to be an evolutionist is when we look at history, what happened in the past. So today, and this is why it rubs the wrong way, and it really goes against the grain, because in school, they're getting handed evolution all the time. And it's getting mixed into things that it doesn't even need to be involved with. So should you be able to explore the evidence to its best conclusion? Well, absolutely. That's what learning and higher learning is supposed to be all about. Being thoughtful and being able to reach conclusions. So we're going to look into that more too as we go along. Just a reminder, 2 Peter 3:3, knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days. Emphasis, the last days. A couple hundred years ago, or 100 years ago, creation was the mode that would be taught. And that's the method. And 100 years later, it's not allowed, and it's not in any curriculum in the public school. So, as Adventists, are we thinking we're in the last days, by the way? And we say yes. In the last days, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. Okay, that's what we're faced with today. So there it is. That's prophetic. So if you're reading Revelation or Matthew 24 or Daniel 7, you can add this because that's prophetic too. Pardon me while we get us all on the same page, basically. So the hard study of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and testing of theories to produce outcomes that are predictable and repeatable. Let that sink in for a second. So we're looking at these natural elements and we're doing studies on them, ... except for evolution. In evolution, there's no argument and there's no choice. It's evolution that we get handed in the school system without debate, without proper testing, without proper consideration. In science, when you share the results of your discovery, it must be defendable by being repeatable anywhere in order to be accepted by your peers. And when a discovery becomes relevant, then it gets published. And when it gets published, everybody gets to review it. And then people that object get to put out their objections. Except for evolution or origins, because there's no debate. This is it. And you know what's funny about that? Evolutionists don't even agree with themselves about the facts and or how to interpret the facts and the information that's out there. Case in point, we might have been around for 13.2 billion years, or we might be around for 6.5 billion years. What's the difference between those two numbers? It's kind of large. If you think about it, it's very large. Nothing is sacred in science. Everything must be rigorously defended except evolution. Some major questions that do need an answer. Does evolution violate the laws of science? Absolutely. And we're going to look into that more. We're going to see how it doesn't even work, because we have laws of nature, natural laws, physical laws, things that God provided for us. Evolution doesn't fit into it. Is evolution's long ages compatible with creation? No, we already talked about that a little bit. So the answer is no. They do not go together. Did God judge the earth with a global flood? The results of that are going to be forthcoming in this rest of this sermon. So we will look at that a little bit. What is macroevolution versus microevolution? If somebody were to say, do you believe in evolution? You got to be careful. Are they talking about micro or are they talking about macro? And we're going to look at that a little bit too. What is irreducible complexity? Very important to determining and answering some questions about evolution and previous science. And we're going to look into that. What are polystrate fossils? Polystrate fossils cannot be answered by evolutionists, period. So, among also a lot of other things. So we'll look at that. So how do we figure out what happened in the past? We figure it out by looking at the evidence around us on the earth and in the cosmos. Is there a difference between Christians looking at the data and evolutionists looking at the data? What do you think? The method is to look at available evidence, which is the same for both evolution and creation. We're all looking at the same facts, except for one detail. We have the Bible, and that's God's revealed word from the only person who was there in the beginning. So that gets kind of hits the nail on the head for us, that we can trust him because he was there. Was Adam and Eve there through the process of creation? No. They only know what God told them. once they were woke up. The religion of atheists, science rules out supernatural intervention and looks only for natural processes, but it is only theory. So it's the theory of evolution, because they don't have the facts. So let's see how both sides fare as we take a look at the evidence. So the first thing I'm going to do is put up my favorite little colorful cartoon. And we can look at all these animals evolved. And there's that evolution tree. Note there's no plants on this one. So we didn't go from the first true cells, is what it says at the bottom, the first true cells. And from there we expand out. How do we get life from non-life? And what is one of the laws of natural science? Getting life from non-life can't happen. Life only comes from life. Every living cell is a machine, and you have over 1 trillion in your body. And when we look at them, there's swimmers in there. There's things going on. There's feeding, and there's getting rid of waste. And in plants, there's photosynthesis taking place. There's all this activity in every living cell, of which you got about 1 trillion. Speaking of swimmers, is sperm going somewhere random and burying itself into sidewalls or anything, or is it going for the prize? Does it go for the egg? Those little things are very amazing. Where they get the intelligence to do what they do, and where they get the ability to swim uphill or any way they have to go. It's pretty interesting. Can you get life from these? So we're going to look at a couple things. There's a rock. How can we treat that rock to make it have life? Water and time might do it. You got to throw in 1 billion years too. But here's more interesting. What about this stick? Can you get life out of that? It's a piece of carbon something, and you can't get life out of one once it dries out, and when it's done, it's done. All right, what about a fresh roadkill? It's got all the components for life. You take it down to the local lab and they revive it. And notice I use roadkill and no pictures. Don't want anybody upset. But can you do anything with a fresh death to revive it, other than Jesus doing it? But that's supernatural, so it doesn't fit into what we're looking at here. So we can't do it. There's nothing we can do with these things to bring life out of it. And we'll look at that a little more. What about that? God's design. How much information is in that little seed? And how durable is it that you can keep it in a dry place and keep it for a long time and it'll still grow you a tree, complete in every way? So that's God's doing, and then the other two are not. By the way, there's no primordial soup around today. There's no place you can go to create a single cell or any other feature. Can't find it. Look at the heading again. What is there about evolution that violates the laws of science? Everything we're talking about here violates the laws of science. Adding complexity to matter. There was a Urey Miller experiment some years back where they tried to build up, and they were successful in building some long chain amino acids or maybe a protein. And I'm not really up to speed on the experiment, but what they had was a pressure vessel. They made it as friendly as they could, taking out oxygen, in other words, taking out all the features that were not advantageous to creating life. And by the way, in water, you can't get life. Not started, because it would break down the things that have to build up to give you life. So you can't take a jar of water and try to build your amino acids and stuff, because it would break down, as I was saying. Adding complexity to matter, how does that play out in today's world? How do we observe it and test it? It ain't happening. We're not adding complexity to anything. And what that's talking about is taking elements and turning them into life. Turning them into life, if you look back at that cell, with all that activity going on in the cell, how do you get that much information? How do you get the amount of information that's in your DNA for something to reproduce? So Darwin didn't have that information, but scientists today do. And their best answer is, but given enough time, it can happen. You cannot add the complexity to matter. It had to be God-given. And unfortunately, that's the only satisfying answer, is that supernatural. Staying with the same subject, there should be thousands of transitional forms. If you look at the layers where you go in and your paleontology and you're digging up the bones and you're seeing what's at the lowest level, the Precambrian and then the Cambrian are the bottom levels. Well, unfortunately, at the bottom levels, even in the Precambrian, you have critters that are fully formed, fully functional, reproducing, full of life. They're complete in every way. They're not evolving. So that's at the very bottom layer. Life is not transitioning. It is what it is. And when you think of all the plants and you think of all the animals, you should be able to see where one is actually going into the other. Well, we're looking at this evolutionary tree here. What's a good word for it? I'd say art. It's art. That's all it is. Somebody's better idea. And it's ever changing, because science is looking at different ways to arrange the tree based on discoveries they make or whatever. So we know the Bible isn't changing, and we know they are changing. And they have to. And there's nothing wrong with science changing when they need to. But still, you need to address the facts and leave room for an argument. Well, let's talk about irreducible complexity. There's a Dr. Job Martin. He has a science degree, he has a dental degree, and then he went back and he got a theological degree. And well, to tell you the truth, he really cracks me up. And he told this story about a giraffe. And the giraffe in the evolutionary process must have started out with a short neck. But the giraffe was getting hungry. And all the food was up in the treetops. So that giraffe He had to evolve a long neck. Or if you're a creationist, you'd say, well, a giraffe would have died because he was hungry and he couldn't get any food. And what's more realistic? Because evolution is a random process. It doesn't happen by design. That's what they want to get rid of design. They want to talk about natural processes. How does a giraffe want to develop a long neck? No. How does he evolve that? That's the question. And it can't happen. He'd either be dead of starvation. There's no mechanism, I'm saying, for that giraffe to grow a long neck, even though the food's up high. God gave him a long neck to get that food up high. Same thing about irreducible complexity. The giraffe has a large heart. Per size ratio, it's got a large heart. And why would that be? It's got to pump blood way up there. Plus, in his arteries, there's a bunch of one-way valves. So if he wants to keep the blood up there, of course, it's an automatic system that keeps the blood flowing up there. But as Dr. Martin said, so the giraffe hunches down and his body's above the water and he goes down and he gets a drink. And along come a couple of hungry lions and he jerks his head up and the blood rushes out of his head and he passes out. I'm sorry. And he passes out and the lions get a meal. Or God designed a sponge in the giraffe's head so that it would have, as he bends over, the blood flows cut off, but he's got blood in his brain to keep feeding it. And when he jerks his head up and he wants to run away from the hungry lions, he gets away. Irreducible complexity in natural processes, and you start out with a single cell. How do you get to the point where you got heart, lungs, skeleton? What came first, the heart or the lungs or the blood? We all know that, but it still has to be mentioned. These are irreducible systems. Here's an irreducible system I don't hear talked about much. What about mitosis? What's the most efficient form of reproduction? That would be mitosis. Cell division. So you have something that wants to replicate itself, and so it divides, and now you got 2 and 4 and 8 and on and on. Where did male and female come from in this natural process? Male having all the male function and female having all the female function. What came first, the male or the female? What makes sense that you have to go find a mate instead of just dividing? How does that come into the random process of things? That's a God-given gift. So from the beginning, God made a male and female. So that's what the Bible says about it. Again, God was there, so I'll go with it. Here's another interesting fact. Survival of the fittest preserves the species. It doesn't evolve them. It makes the strong survive and make the herd strong or the species strong, and the weak are gone or they get weeded out. That actually violates evolution because it just doesn't give a cause for that. An evolutionist's brain was developed randomly. Mine was thoughtfully created. I hope we're all in agreement on that one. Not about mine, but your own. Let's look at bacteria. It's a very testable model for evolution. Bacteria reproduces rapidly. You can play with it by changing its environment, introducing different foods. You can do anything you want to it, and you get generations in very short order. And labs like to work with bacteria for that reason, because they can turn it over real fast. At the end of all their study and at the end of all their inducements, what do they have? They have bacteria. Okay, what about microevolution as opposed to macroevolution? The dog kind, the Bible talks about kind, and scientists, secular, they talk about species. Here's a dog. There's a dog. And we know there's a lot in between, and then you can go long hair, short hair, hairless, you name it. That's all about microevolution, where adaptation can come into play. Here we're manipulating with them by taking one breed and breeding it with another, and then coming up with different adaptation anyway. So we can believe in microevolution or adaptability because God said, go ahead and inhabit. In order to inhabit and go everywhere, you have to be able to adapt to your environment. Dogs shed in the summer unless you take them somewhere where there is no summer, and maybe they won't shed. And if you put them somewhere hot, they won't grow the heavy fur. So we're looking at adaptation, and it's testable, believable, and it's microevolution. Okay, here's the one I love, macroevolution. Now, we talked about no transitional forms anywhere. We already looked at that. Once again, we go from a monkey to a man. I think the second from right kind of looks like Roger in the 70s, but that's... Okay. And here, once again, all right, once again, what do you have, or what do you call the transitional forms in between a monkey and man? You call it evolution, I call it art. Where were they? What do they have? They don't have these things. It's all conjecture, guesswork. And as we're evolving, where are we headed? We're still on a journey. According to evolution, we're getting better. And it's about time to throw this in here. When is common sense not so common? Okay, a few reference verses. 1 Corinthians something 39. It's actually 15:39. All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one kind of flesh of men, another flesh of animals, another of fish, another of birds. There are also celestial bodies, terrestrial bodies, but the glory of celestial is one, and the glory of terrestrial is another. So you have the planets are not as glorious as the suns that are giving off light, and one sun is not the same as another. There are suns out there, or stars, that are so big they'll hold 1,000,000 suns, and the sun will hold 1,000,000 Earths. And I mean, I'm rounding off because I don't know the actual number, but it's the right kind of perspective. There are huge, huge stars that we've discovered. And the brightness of one, you have a blue star and a yellow star. And even the yellow stars, which we have one for our sun, they're not all the same. And they're not all as stable as our sun. They're not all as conducive to life. So there's one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars, and one star differs from another star in glory. What is there about evolution that violates the laws of science? The theory of the Big Bang is kind of outrageous. In the Big Bang and similar ones, they have other theories where there was a great interruption in gravity or something and it caused stuff to happen. But it's the theory of where do you get something from nothing? But here we go, we got the Big Bang. And out, first of all, comes this gas traveling it's hot gas traveling at a very high rate of speed. At some point, the gases have to slow down and join together under gravity and form the stars, the planets, and everything that's in the universe. Now here, where we have the gravity, the real gravity of a planet or a star once a star is formed, even then, if you spray your aerosol can, the gases go out and they don't coalesce. They never come back together. In space, there could be gravity, but there's no mass. And scientists say there's gravity in space, but there's no mass for it to act on. And gases just can't get it together. There's no real natural process, and they cannot identify a process that says that we could coalesce this stuff and make planets, stars, and everything that's out there. Keep in mind the Earth was made to be inhabited. Perfect location to the sun. If you remember, I'm sure all of us can remember back in the 50s where we thought there were Martians out there. Okay, maybe not all can remember that. We keep learning, and what we keep learning is nothing's inhabitable out there. It's a hostile environment everywhere, and if you're going to go somewhere, you better have a good suit. There was a Dr. Humphreys some years back, before we sent probes off to Venus and other planets. Dr. Humphreys is a creationist, and he predicted the magnetic field in Venus and I forget which other planet that totally went against the evolutionist and scientific community and what they thought there would be for a magnetic field. Dr. Humphreys was right, because he used 6,000 years as a basis, what the starting point would look like and where it would be today. He was accurate. NASA and the scientists were not. But we can't have the argument. That's the thing. We cannot argue this. We walked on the moon and it's got a dust layer on it. And we can measure how much dust is on the moon and how fast it's accumulating. Because science is a good thing if it's used right. Yeah, it gives us all the modern miracles, as they say, but discoveries and helpful aids. And we make a lot of things predictable, but you won't read about that in the textbooks because it goes against evolution, because the amount of dust that's accumulated on the moon is not enough for the billions of years scenario. There's icy comets circling the sun. I'm going to have to speed up. Icy comets have a tail as they go around the sun, as they revolve around. That means they're giving up all their material. And it's said they're not going to last but a couple thousand years, and they're done, depending on where their orbit is at. But these are orbiting comets that we see periodically. There's no accounting for why we have icy comets today if there's billions of years, because 2,000 years, that's a short period of time. Well, they invented the Oort cloud, and the Oort cloud is some theoretical place out in the cosmos where a bunch of comets are, and every once in a while they bump into each other or whatever, and one gets thrown out towards the sun. And that is not discoverable or has not been discovered. Nobody knows it's there, but that's a theory. Well, I'm not going for it, just so you know. The amount of salt in our oceans is not good for billions of years. It's good for 6,000 years, and throw in the flood. You got to have the flood in there too. And then you have the right amount of salt for the creation. Amount of people on the earth, taken into account for all the famines, wars, everything that's gone on. Taking into account everything we discover as we unearth in archaeology and everything we've done. The planet should not contain billions of years worth of people. And with everything that's going on, look how fast we can grow and multiply over the short period of time. And we've seen it. We've had continual wars, and we still double our population now very rapidly. 7 or 8 years, I don't know, not long. It used to take a lot longer, but as we build up the population, the time frame gets shorter and shorter. How long should it take God to make a planet? Going back to now a good creation question. Is there an interrupted period of 1,000,000 years in creation? How about John 2, the miracle of turning the water into wine at Cana? How fast did that occur? Were you taking H2O and taking it into a carbon and biological tanks of wine? As fast as they could pour it, they dipped and found out it was wine. How long should it take God to make a planet? He said he spoke it. That's what he said. Fast. Interesting facts about paleontology. How do you make a fossil? Anything that dies gets disintegrated. You could have a deer on the side of the road and it's gone in a month or two, right? If you just leave it alone. How do you make a fossil? We got so many. You have to bury them in silt rapidly in a flood situation. That's how you make a fossil. It's the only way we know. Soft tissue, back in 2005, Dr. Mary Schweitzer discovered soft tissue in a dinosaur bone. So she published, and the whole community was in an uproar, and they came back and said, that will not do. You have contaminated your specimens, and you got some other biological content external from that bone. She repeated it 15 times just on that bone. And it's irrefutable now. And since then, there are so many that have been discovered, different bones. Before that, they weren't looking for it.
What does soft tissue mean?
That means that Normally in a fossil, you have mineralization where everything that was living is no longer there. It's totally discarded, done away with. And so the fossil evidence that you dig up is a bone, but it's really made out of elements of stone. But when they find soft tissue in a bone, that means that was the part of the living element that couldn't last millions of years. It's just totally unconceivable. And now the scientific community has to say, well, I guess that biological stuff can last longer than we thought. But it can't. There's no missing links in vegetation or animals, and there should be thousands of transitional forms. We kind of covered that. The earliest forms in the lowest layers of life are fully developed and highly complex marine animals, such as the trilobite. Trilobite is throughout the Cambrian and Precambrian. And once again, it's got eyes, it's got motion, it's got reproduction, it's got everything it needs. It's a complete living animal. It's obsolete today, but that's an example of the marine life. And whether you're looking at shells or whatever is in that lowest layer, it's all fully developed, fully functioning, nothing transitional to be seen. Polystrate fossils. You can see the picture of a tree going up through many layers. Well, it represents millions of years in evolution. So you got to picture a tree standing, and over long periods of time, the sediment grows up around it, but the tree stays standing. And it never goes away. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't break down. It doesn't do what it should do in anything that's testable today. So they can't account for that. And they're all over the world. Found predominantly in coal fields because of the accumulation of carbon material, coal that came from vegetation. And then you find these thrown in there with it because it didn't fully decompose. So billions of years doesn't work. This chart can trace, and if you look at the bottom, you'll see I circled 4.6 billion years. According to evolution, the evolution religion, it took a long time to form the earth as we see it now. And here we have all these layers so scientifically laid out for us, the Precambrian, Cambrian, the Paleozoic, and the Mesozoic, and on, and then the variations within the major branches all the way down to today. Or you have a worldwide flood, and you see the bedrock layers, like if you look in the Grand Canyon, you see the granites and the things that compose the bedrock layers, and all the layers of strata are set on top of them. So that is what we're looking at when we look into the Grand Canyon, or if you look where they cut a road through the side of the hill, you'll always see these layers. How did they get there? Evolutionists say a long time, and we say it happened during the flood. It took 6 days of creation and the worldwide flood to have the earth looking as it does today, except for landscape and natural disasters that have occurred since. Mount St. Helens is a great place to explore. With all that volcanic activity, with the mountain blowing up, it doesn't even look like that today. You got a lot of growth. You got a miniature Grand Canyon. You got layers and layers of sediment that came off of the crashing down of the mountainside and the volcanic activity. And on top of that, you have new growth, lots of new growth. Here we go. Take a test. Design or evolved is the question. What is it? Okay, it was definitely designed. Second question. This is the one I really like. I got this from Eric Hovind watching TV. Is that obviously designed? Obviously. But DNA is a stroke of luck. And how much information is there in DNA? You could unwrap a chain. Billions. You could unwrap a chain and stretch it to the moon. I mean, it's phenomenal the amount of information that we have to come up with. But we know that's designed. We know there was a flood on Mars because they got these long glacier or craters longer than our Grand Canyon, like the length of the United States on Mars. So they figured there was a worldwide flood on Mars, but not here. We have water here. They don't have water up there. Okay. Who is quoted here? I got to get this wrapped up. Isaiah 46:9. Who's quoted? Quoted. Remember the former things of old, for I am God, there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times, things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do my pleasure. Who's quoted here? To whom will you liken me and make me equal and compare me, that we should be alike? Who's quoted here? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. When I said to the sea, this far you may come, but no further, and here your proud waves must stop. Homework, Romans 1:18-32. Don't want to get into it here. You could hold your hands over your ears and you could squeeze your eyes shut. But one day you're going to hear the shout and the trumpet, and it's going to be the lightning flash from the east to the west. And there will be no evolutionists. Summation. Science can't explain evolution. They really can't. No one has observed evolution. No one except God. There's no spontaneous generation of life. No missing links. The worldwide flood of judgment happened. We're obviously wonderfully made. And in the final conclusion, our closing hymn is number 208.